just show us the data. Just show us the evidence. And that's what's happening right now on our Capitol Hill.
What these researchers found was that vaccinated children had 4.29 times the rate of asthma, 3.03 times the rate of atopic disease, 5.96 times the rate of autoimmune disease, and 5.53 times the rate of neurodevelopmental disorders. All of these findings were statistically significant. Had it found vaccinated children were healthier, it no doubt would have been published immediately. But because it found the opposite, it was shoved in a drawer.
Have you ever heard someone say, "I believe in vaccines," as if it's the new religion? And the fact of the matter is, it's not a new religion, it just might be an old one.
Ooh, where do we go from here? I'm a curious patient of yours. I'm Nick. You're Dr. Ron Dummar, Community Health and Wellness, a vibrant practice here in Heber City, Utah. This is the Be Well Now podcast, and we talk about all kinds of different issues. We cover current events, we cover big picture health issues. There was this hearing that you were sending me so many sound bites from and clips from, and I was like, I don't even know who this guy is or
What's
why I
so funny
should care.
because I love this stuff.
Yeah,
I love it, and I'm like, oh man, and on my mind, I'm thinking everybody's watching this, right? Why would not everybody be watching this?
Right.
That's what I think. And the reality is, I send it to you, and you're like, what's going on? Who is this guy?
I'm like, what do I watch? So again, you're always studying research, and like one thing I know about you is you are studying. You're a perpetual student of health and everything related to wellness. So what do you want to say about vaccines in this podcast?
Well, I think really what we want to say is that there's a discussion being had at the centers of our government institutions in the legislature, right? We're having a hearing essentially on essentially the research of these products that have been introduced to our children at the youngest, most sensitive of ages. And what we want to know as the American public is, have you done your due diligence? Have our pharmaceutical companies and has our government and has the organizations, the CDC and the AMA and those organizations that have been set up to protect us, the American public, from illness and from ailments, have they done their job? That's what we want to know, and that's what these hearings are about. And so if we've done research and we've put it together and we can show, hey, look, here's all the research and all the data that shows that these immunizations that we've been giving to people and these injections and these drugs that we've been giving to people for 100 years are safe and they're effective, and we can prove that we've saved lives and this is how, then great, we want to see it. We want that data, we want that evidence, instead of just in some religiosity type way telling us and in bovine agreement, oh yes, they're safe and they're effective and we know that they work. Instead of just doing that, just show us the data, just show us the evidence. And that's what's happening right now on our Capitol Hill.
Well, I've had discussions with people before saying I have reservations about vaccines, and they're like, you are not following the science. They treat me like I'm the one who is the wacko. Mm-hmm. I don't believe in science. Yes. That's the argument they make if you say, I don't know about the vaccine in my baby.
Well, and
the
it's
needle in my baby, or the flu vaccine this year. Like, if I express reservations, I'm made out to be someone who doesn't think clearly.
Yeah, well, it's appropriate for them to say, to talk about vaccines as a belief or not belief, because that's where we are. That's literally where we are.
Whoa.
But it's not appropriate for them to talk about it as a science or non-scientific thought process, because what we're finding is there's actually a significant amount of variation and possible disagreement as to whether or not we really have scientific evidence to back these things up.
Well, we don't want to get censored or blocked off of any of our platforms, so why don't we stick with the data? Let's talk about facts today.
Yes.
In a way that is not incendiary. Let's stick with the information that we have.
And really only covering, what we're trying to cover essentially is highlight what happened on Capitol Hill.
Yes.
And what was said, what was talked about, and how that impacts us or may influence us.
Okay, this Henry Ford Medical Center study is brought up at this hearing. So who is this attorney and what is this study?
Yeah, so Aaron Siri's the attorney. If you are not following Aaron Siri, you don't have to follow him if you don't want to. I like following him because of what he's done. He's a proponent, essentially, for safety and efficacy in our industries. And one of those main industries that he works in, or I'd say the industry he works in, is the pharmaceutical industry. So he works with that, promoting safety and efficacy. One of the areas within that he works in is with regards to vaccines. And so he does represent certain parents of vaccine-injured children. And he has represented them in the courts that you have to go to, which essentially is like suing your own government. And the reason why, we can talk about that in a minute too, but he has to essentially sue his own government to try to get compensation for these people because of the harms that have occurred to them. Now, this was established in like 1986, I think it was. It was a vaccine injury compensation fund that was established by Ronald Reagan. And the reason it was established, okay, was because there were so many complaints and so many lawsuits that were being filed because of harms that were being incurred by people taking vaccines, that the pharmaceutical companies came to the US government and said, unless we have some sort of protection, this makes no sense for us to continue. Okay? Now that's a business decision. And imagine if we had stopped there and said, hold on, well, you guys are on your own, and we're not going to actually fund and protect you and give you liability as a pharmaceutical company because you're a private entity and you're fine, you guys can figure it out. If we had done that, then it would have changed our landscape completely, especially with regards to vaccines. Okay? Now, shortly after that, we had between then and 1986, we had a total of like 2 oral vaccines and 3 injected vaccines. That's like what people got, period. Every child, that's all they got, okay? Since that time, we have now up to 72 plus injections of 29 illnesses, infectious diseases, okay? And they started pouring right in. You can look at when we started introducing a lot of these immunizations. 1986, the act was passed to actually protect these pharmaceutical companies from liability. So now imagine, let's say you were making a product as a company. You're making a product as a company. And the US government says, you know what, I mean, we have products right here. Imagine if this product, they could say, US government protected me 100% from liability. So it doesn't matter what I put in here, right? I could put the cheapest ingredients in here because I know that if anybody does get hurt from taking this, they're gonna have to sue the government, not me, not my company, to actually get compensation. So I'm completely protected, so I can put whatever I want to in here. Where's my motivation? Of course I'm gonna put the cheapest products possible. I'm gonna have, it would work, we would want it to work, hopefully we'd want it to, but then what about proving safety? What about the amount of research, money, and dollars do you think that I would pour into studying that product? And efficacy, right? Like,
you look at the motivation from a business perspective, right? Like money makes the world go round, and businesses are all about, even if they have good motivations to like, we want to help people, but we want to help the most people in the most profitable way, protecting our shareholders and also helping people.
That's why we want things to function.
Even in the most ideal way, it's still about how can we make the most money?
Yeah.
Even if the people aren't evil. Mm-hmm. And the motivation may be to make the most money, well, let's have the cheapest product in there. I mean, I'm just thinking of like,
well, and
I'm devil's
imagine if you're
this.
making the decision, but you don't know.
Right.
You're a decision maker.
You're a business guy.
You know nothing about health.
Yeah.
You know nothing about medicine. You know nothing about physiology. What are you going to decide? So we're not sitting here blaming people. We're not trying to put people, on the cross. We're not trying to say, hey, it's your fault. What we're really trying to say is explain to you, essentially, how we got where we are, right? So that you can understand as well when we talk about some of these things that Aaron Siri, this attorney, brought up, that he's been representing patients before the US government so that he could actually get compensation for these people. When he brings up some of these studies and when he talks about them in certain ways, you understand the motivation behind those was probably really thin to put a lot of money into making sure that they were fully accurate.
Henry Ford Medical Center study.
Dr. Marcus Service at one point, who was the head of infectious disease at Henry Ford Medical Center. And he agreed to meet and to potentially do the study. He is conducts clinical trials for vaccines, including for the Moderna COVID-19 vaccine. He's avowedly pro-vaccine. And when we met him, we argued that this was an opportunity to shut the anti-vaxxers up about their claim that unvaccinated children are healthier. To our surprise, Dr. Zerva said he would conduct the study. He recruited a chief epidemiologist and 2 statisticians within Henry Ford to do so. These were mainstream scientists who no doubt held orthodox views regarding vaccines.
So the Henry Ford Medical Center study actually was a study performed that was never fully published, okay? And one of the reasons it was never fully published is that some of the doctors who published it honestly were afraid they would lose their jobs if they did publish it. And one of the reasons that they were concerned most likely that they would lose their jobs is because the results of the study actually showed that the vaccinated did far poorly than the unvaccinated. So those patients who chose not to be vaccinated in this study did far better, okay? And so imagine putting that forward in the study. Imagine putting forward this research of saying, okay, I understand the product here. We want to protect vaccines. We understand that vaccines are so critical and so important for people. And we all believe, right? Because we believe vaccines work. So we don't want to cast doubt on these vaccines because, well, we believe they work. And so now you can see how some of this religious dogma kind of plays its way as well into what actually gets promoted and what actually gets published. So they did a lot of things in this research study as well to say, they looked at it, I'm sure, and they were shocked, and Aaron talks about this. You can go listen to Aaron Siri discuss it as well, but they looked at it and they said, there's no way. Like maybe, let's see if we can change some of the factors of the observations. So what they did is they said, okay, well, we're only going to include certain patients who had a certain time period that they were actually a part of the medical center. Okay, so if they were a part of our medical center for less than 5 years, then we're not going to include them anymore in the study. Okay, so they pulled those out. And they saw, it was still significant that unvaccinated fared better than the vaccinated, okay? So then they went on and they said, okay, well, maybe what we're really seeing is that the patients who get vaccinated or are vaccinated tend to have more medical visits as well. So maybe that's what we're seeing. So let's see if we can pair out some of these that are having certain medical visits or determine who's having more medical visits. So what they found was that the individuals who got vaccinated they tended to see their physician about 7 times a year, okay? And the individuals who did not get vaccinated, kind of overall as a group, they were way healthier, and they tended to see their physician about 2 times a year. So it did make sense. But then they looked at another factor, and the other factor was this. Those in the unvaccinated group who did actually have a condition, like an autoimmune condition or some other type of infectious condition, they did actually present to their provider in a lot higher frequency. So those individuals who had a more serious condition that were unvaccinated, they did actually choose to go to the medical doctor, and they went 5 times a year. So what they found was that, yes, what we're saying is that the unvaccinated did appear healthier, and it's not just that those who are unvaccinated happen to think or have some mentality that they shouldn't go to their doctor. No, it's if they are unhealthy or if they have a condition, the people that they're going to go to is actually the doctor. They're still going to go to the medical community. And so it factored that out. And so ultimately, when you look at this Henry Ford study, it was never fully published because really it did not support the current narrative that we believe in vaccines.
Well, who funded the Henry Ford study? I mean, what's the motivation between that organization?
Well, the Henry Ford, that's a good question. The Henry Ford Medical Center funded the study ultimately. And so that medical center, I'm sure, got government funding as well. But you're looking at it and you say, well, is there any pharmaceutical interest actually in that study? And I actually don't believe that there was a significant propagation or significant funding of pharmaceutical interests in that study. I don't know for certain.
So he brings this up, vaccinated are more prone to chronic health issues.
Yes.
In this hearing.
Absolutely, and that's what we see. That's actually near the beginning of the hearing as well, where we hear that.
There's also some talk about the hepatitis B vaccine.
2 studies by Gallagher and Goodman show that the birth dose of the hepatitis B vaccine significantly increases autism risk. 3 studies by Anthony Mawson confirm that vaccination increases the odds of developing autism by at least 4.2-fold.
Yeah, the hepatitis B vaccine is a really interesting one. Because the hepatitis B vaccine, if you look back at the hepatitis B vaccine when it was introduced, it was originally introduced as a vaccine for drug users, people sharing needles and doing a variety of, you would see, behaviors that you wouldn't espouse for your children, right? And so that really is what we would look at, sharing needles, blood exposure to blood product and things like that. And so the hepatitis B vaccine came out originally for that. And then all of a sudden, we got to this place where—
That was 1981?
Yeah, it was 1981. But then what happened shortly after 1986, again, remember when liability came away from them, is we started introducing hepatitis B just to every infant. And
because it's a one-size-fits-all approach, and it's easy, and it's like, well, let's have everyone have this.
Yes. Yep.
That's what I like about vaccines is, as a professional communicator, it's so easy to just be like, just get the shot and you're gonna be good.
Yeah.
Like, it's so easily packaged. It's a packageable, soundbite friendly, easy solution.
Yeah.
I mean, this is communicate.
That's
just
what we were told.
Get the shot and you'll be better.
You'll be fine. Yeah, and we've always been told that, right? We're still being told that. If you just get the shot, if you just get the injection, you won't have anything to worry about. And we'll discuss more of this on other podcasts as well, but what we really need to, and what we really want you to understand as well, is how do I have and develop as robust an immune response as possible, right? And how do I engage in life in as robust a way as I want to, and be able to have confidence that my immune system is strong, okay? And there are methods and there are ways of doing that and supporting it that are parallel to the vaccine program.
You mentioned a word that starts with A here. I don't know if that's fair play in the vaccine talk, but what's the hepatitis B vaccine point you want to make?
Yeah, so with regards to the hepatitis B vaccine, there is some data and research that is showing as well that there's a causative relationship to autism. And is it completely there? Has it been validated? Has it been verified? Well, that research needs to be done and explored more, but it shouldn't be suppressed. It needs to be open and it needs to be allowed to be seen. But we know that vaccines in general cause immune dysregulation. They can cause immune dysregulation in the body. There's plenty of research out there for that. And immune dysregulation essentially means that you have an immune response or an inflammatory response in your body when you otherwise wouldn't need to. Or you have an immune response to a certain pathogenic factor and it remains inflamed for way longer than it should. And your body goes in an aberrant immune response. And so imagine having an inflamed state, an inflamed brain, and inflamed nerves, right? This inflammation that is sent out by your immune system is actually designed to heal initially. It's designed as healing. Inflammation is healing tissue, right? It's healing chemicals. But over a long period of time, inflammation becomes very problematic to the body, where it creates a state of dysfunction. and physiological processes start to slow down. Okay, and so even the function of your mitochondria is impacted by inflammation because your cell, the phospholipid bilayer of the cell itself, gets really inflamed and swollen, and so it has a harder time exchanging nutrients. And the cytoplasm within the cell, right, the cytoplasm, the space, has debris build up in it, and it needs to be able to eliminate that debris. And if it can't exchange those properly and eliminate and detoxify, then we develop a lot of perpetual disease states or chronic disease or chronic illnesses. And so that's really, you look at where we are. We're not saying ultimately, and I don't think Aaron Siri or RFK Jr. are saying that this is all because of vaccines. No, no one's saying that. We're not saying that. I'm not saying that. What we are saying is, let's make sure that our data around all of our significant medications, and especially around those things that we give carte blanche to people. Like if I'm gonna, do you know another medical intervention or product that we give to every single living person?
No, the only thing I can think of that seems to be super acceptable is like, you can do this, it's pretty good for you, like vitamin C. Vitamin C seems to be like a pretty like friendly one that everyone can kind of agree on. Like take some vitamin C, it's probably good for you if you're sick.
Sure.
But it's not like,
but it's not
an
a
injection.
Chemical. Yeah, and it's not a chemical. It's not a product that was made in a lab, and it's nothing that has to go through any sort of like crazy approval process in order to meet specific standards to suggest its safety and efficacy, right? But all of your medications should and do, and a lot of your medications that are put out by pharmaceutical companies, they go through years of research and data, and even after all of that, going through and proving through these sophisticated means and measures, they still sometimes, quite frequently actually, get called off of the market.
Shall we move on to 661 studies?
This is what transparency looks like. Our findings directly refute false claims about vaccine testing.
This is a really interesting point. Did you watch this one about?
I watched some of them. I tried to get through most of the hearing.
I think it was Dr. Scott. So there's a medical doctor who is out of Stanford, but medical doctor. He comes on and essentially he reads his speech. And in there he mentions, we found thousands of studies that support vaccines, and among them, those that the number that use the ingredients that are similar to the ones that we use for children and infectious diseases, we found 661. Okay, and so Aaron Siri looks at that, and he was so well prepared. Aaron Siri was so well prepared, and he's done this for a number of years. That's probably why. But it was like they couldn't come up with anything that Aaron Siri didn't have a really good answer for. Okay, so he looks at this and he says, like, first of all, 500 of those 600, or 550 or something of those 600 were actually studies that were done in and around HIV. Okay, and they were done on adults, not for kids, right? And so trying to say or suggest, hey, that this is going to equate and make sense and extrapolate, it doesn't work. So if we throw those out, now we're down to a significant amount. And one of the key things around these 661 studies as well is that they're claiming, the big claim is that they're using a inert placebo. And this is super important. This is a very, very important point for everybody to understand, is this inert placebo. Essentially what this means is inert means it's like nothing, right? It's like giving you saline, right? If you put saline in your body, it's like salt water. Your body is made up essentially of 70% salt water. So if we put a little injection of salt water in your body, it should do nothing. It should mean nothing, okay? So that's an inert placebo, okay? So that is really critical. So when they look at these other studies, they say, okay, was there an inert placebo? And that's what they're claiming. They're claiming that they were done with inert placebos. But what happens with these other studies is they actually use other products. They're not using inert placebos. Okay? There was one study that actually did use an inert placebo. One study out of all of those 661 of those thousands, okay? There was one study that actually used the inert placebo. Okay, and then what that study required, and this is fascinating. Okay, it was done. I think it was it with regards to hepatitis B, but the one that they what they studied is they said, okay, here's the inert placebo study, but we're going to require that everyone who is in this study has 3 injections of this before they enter the study. So they required them to actually get the vaccine before they entered the study, but then they did use within the study an inert placebo. That was what happened with the one that they actually did inert placebo. So why is an inert placebo important again? It's important because if you have a group that you say, here's the vaccine I'm studying, here's what I want to know. I want to know if it's any better than doing nothing, which essentially would be like injecting you with the saline water, right? So I want to know if it's better than doing nothing. Okay, so that's an inert placebo. But if you take someone and you say, okay, we're actually going to give you the vaccines before, now you've just gotten rid really of your placebo group. Okay, so it's so important to have a placebo group to determine whether or not what we're doing and what we're giving our babies, our youngest, most vulnerable of kids in life, are what we're giving them, is it beneficial for them? Is there a net benefit or is there a net risk? And honestly, if I were to ask any parent on earth, would you rather enter into something that's a net risk for your child or a net benefit? What do they want? They're not. If there's a risk, they're going to want to understand that risk. They're going to want to understand what the potential benefit of taking that risk would be. Okay? And so they would always err on the side of saying, you know what, I don't understand that risk, and there's a risk there, and there seems to be no risk with. So if there's no risk and there's the same benefit, then why don't you just take the one with no risk?
There's a term about vaccines saving, 154 million lives?
I heard for the first time during the RFK Jr. hearing that there's been a study that vaccines have saved 154 million lives. You have a somewhat interesting take on that. Do you want to talk
sure.
a bit about that scientific gem?
Absolutely. I think the claim about 154 million lives saved is it actually is the epitome of the corruption of science.
This is a very, very interesting one. And this is actually it was put out by the World Health Organization. And vaccines saved 154 million lives. And the interesting thing is, and this is what is pointed out very clearly in the hearing, is that when you go and you look at the terms, because you have to have terms, like how do you find that we saved 154 million lives, right? How do you measure that? What was the data set? And to be able to say, wow, we measured 154 million lives, or we saved 154 million lives, we need to be able to have appropriate terms and data set for that. But the reality is they go in the article itself, and if you read the fine print ultimately, which is where they put all of the details about how they came to that, they said there's no way to put bounds on the validity or veracity of that claim, which essentially means there's really no way to determine whether that's way higher, that we saved way more, or that whether we actually killed way more, right? It could have been, sure, that they saved 500 million, or it could have been that they actually killed 200 million, based on their own claims and the way they explained, the way they came up with 154 million. So really what is being said there is that there was no evidence and no research and no data that really went into establishing and coming up with a 154 million figure. It just seemed to be a really good, appropriate one to use for the marketing arm of the World Health Organization.
The studies that look at DTP vaccine show that it causes more mortality, far more mortality, than lives saved. While it may reduce deaths from diphtheria, tetanus, and pertussis, the studies show numerous rate the kids. The seminal study showed that the kids who got DTP died at 10 times the rate. 10 times the rate than kids who did not get that vaccine.
This was with regards to DPT, and I think it was it was done in Japan, a Japanese study. And it found that DPT, the children, the infants who got the DPT vaccine actually had a 10 times higher mortality rate. That meant a rate of death. Now, the interesting thing in this study, though, too, is it did show that those who got the vaccine had a lower incidence of DPT, diphtheria, pertussis, and tetanus. Okay, so they had a lower incidence of those contracting those illnesses, but they had a 10 times higher rate of dying. Okay, so then you can ask yourself, would I rather not have the condition, or would I rather live? That's what the study is pointing to, okay? And so again, like we said with parents, I'm a parent, I'm looking at this, I have 5 boys and 1 girl, and I say, what risk do I want them to be able to enter into, and how do I keep them as safe as possible? And when I evaluate that study and I look at that and I say, well, I may prevent them from diphtheria, pertussis, and tetanus, but in the same regard, at the same time, I could actually be increasing the likelihood that they have an early death. That's pretty stark and chilling.
And this study is legit, out of Japan?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yes, absolutely. And we can put the sources and everything for these, and you can see them all on Aaron Siri as well.
We're referring to him and his testimony,
absolutely,
which he did before Congress. I mean, this is a current events situation where, like, he shared all of this, and so we're having you opine with your wisdom.
Yes, I'm opining, but I'm opining based on what he said, because, and to be fair, I haven't actually a lot of these details that he's bringing out have never been a part of my vernacular here. It's just not been part of my subset of studies either.
What's the last thing you want to mention that Aaron Siri brought up?
Yeah, so the other interesting thing is the Institute of Medicine. They did a study.
The best the IOM can conclude was, quote, "There is no evidence that the schedule is not safe," end quote. This, of course, also means the IOM cannot find evidence to conclude that the schedule is safe.
They were basically told to study the entirety of the breadth of research and data that we have, right? And determine whether or not there was a causative factor, whether vaccines were beneficial or whether they were harmful, right? And they went through and they scoured the data, like literally consuming and observing the entirety of the breadth of all the research and all the data that we have, okay? That's what they were told to do. And after all this time, what they came up with, the statement that they came up with to prove, essentially, the idea here is to prove vaccine safety, right?
Yeah.
The idea is to say, look, we've scoured all the evidence, we've reviewed everything, this is all the data sets, these are all the points that we can point to, these are all the research studies that have been done and the examples that we have. And basically what they came down to was this conclusion that they said, we cannot determine that there is no evidence to suggest that they were harmful, that they are not safe. That's what they said. What we can determine by evaluating all of the data is that there is no evidence to suggest that they are not safe. Okay, so does that sit with you? Well, I mean, it didn't sit well with me. You look at that and you go, wow, after evaluating all the data, the most you can say to me is that, well, I can't say that they're not safe, right? Okay, well, that also means, on the flip side, that you can't say that they are safe, okay? So if you can't say they're not safe, it's like I have a threshold, in autoimmune when I draw labs on patients, we do an anti-nuclear antibody test, and they have this threshold, and oftentimes they'll put the threshold up at 1/80, and it'll say negative 1/80, and then it'll say borderline 1/80, and then it'll say positive 1/80, and I'm like, oh, that's interesting, right? They put all 3 of them. Like, I can choose as a physician, I guess, at that point, whether it's negative or positive. And that's essentially the same reading they're giving here. right? They're saying, well, we can't say that it's not safe, but equally, we also can't say that they are safe. Okay, so if you can't say they are not safe and you can't say that they are safe, really what you're saying is you don't know. And so if we don't know, if that's where we've come to, and you've evaluated the entire body of research in all of this, and the best you can say is, well, we can't determine that they are not, we have no evidence to suggest that they are not safe. If that's the best you can do, then what you're saying also is you don't know if they are safe. And if we don't know if they are safe, then we need to rethink this, restudy, reevaluate, because I hope that they are safe. And I want to find options for my children that are safe and that are effective and that do work. And when we have those, and we have the data and the research to support them, like with homeoprophylaxis, which needs more rigorous research behind it, but it does have significant data sets that actually support that it is effective at preventing ailments, right? And preventing diseases like leptospirosis and dengue fever in Brazil and chikungunya in India. Like a variety of conditions have actually been studied, and some of these even with placebo controls on homeoprophylaxis. And we get all the time people that say to us, well, yeah, but they're just not as good and not as rigorous and it just doesn't hold up to the scientific rigor as vaccines. And what we're seeing right now through this hearing and through Aaron Seary and through these other doctors that are testifying is the fact of the matter is we don't know on vaccines.
What I do know is that we have a podcast about homeoprophylaxis,
yes,
which you've coined HP. And although there's probably a lot more to say here, I'd like for folks, if they're curious, if they're watching on YouTube, they could actually click this video.
Click right there, homeoprophylaxis.
Homeoprophylaxis, HP. You
Health
learn
power.
Way more about it. It's a very fascinating parallel track potentially to vaccines. Dr. Ron Dummar talks about it. And there's always going to be more to say. But we do hope that you be well now.
Be well now. Namaste.
Namaste.